Welcome to this episode of the SLM podcast, again in collaboration with the Resilience Connection. And today I'm speaking with the very wonderful Jessica Buchanan. We have one thing in common, which
Yeah.
is why we're speaking, is that you have also had the is it a displeasure of being kidnapped?
Yeah, I would definitely call it a displeasure. There was
Displeasure.
nothing pleasurable about it.
Yeah, what certainly wasn't on the bucket list.
Nope, nope.
No.
Still not.
No, not repeatable.
Uh,
So Jessica, would you mind giving everyone a kind of a potted history, really? I think give a background to yourself and introduce
Sure.
yourself.
Sure. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm Jessica Buchanan. I'm an American who, I'm a teacher by profession, and I was working in East Africa in the early aughts, and around 2009, I moved up to Hargeisa, Somaliland with my husband, my new husband. I met him in Nairobi while I was teaching, and yeah, the rest is written in my New York Times bestselling book, Impossible Odds, that I co-wrote with my husband.
Yep.
I now live in the DC area, and he still works in international development. I do not. I speak and I write, and I have a publishing company for women. We have two kiddos now, 12 and 10, and I'm just really grateful to be alive, every day.
Yes.
And I am grateful to be here and get to share my story.
Likewise, it's I hadn't actually heard your story before. Thank you for that intro. Um,
Sure.
I hadn't heard your story before. It was a friend of mine from the Royal Marines who messaged me on Instagram and shared a link to one of your videos.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, "Ooh," and he said you guys might have a good conversation. So
Yeah.
that's why.
Yeah. That's why I love social media. I connect with
Yes,
people I wouldn't otherwise have connected with. There's a lot of bad to it, um,
there
but
is. Yes.
but there's a lot of good too.
Yeah,
So
there's some good things.
remarkable. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I've had another through LinkedIn, and then through that guy chatted to him, and he's referred me to somebody else who I spoke to
Mhm.
yesterday, and it's been great. I've been loving it.
Awesome. Love that.
Yeah.
Love it.
So and this I've been really looking forward to speaking with you
Me
today.
too.
Because as I say, we do have that one unique thing in common, um, of being kidnapped, and your book is on my Christmas list actually.
Oh, well, I could have just sent you one. Well, I can't. I can still send you one. Merry Christmas. Give me your
So,
address.
because I thank you, that's very kind of you.
Mhm.
That wasn't the intention, by the way.
No, I know, but I've got boxes everywhere. I've got boxes of books everywhere. Part of the hazards of being a publisher who
Well,
also
yes,
writes.
kind of goes with the territory, really.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, tripping over your own work.
Yep. Yep.
So I have some kind of notes of things that
Mhm.
I'd like to delve into. So if we on the day on that fateful day, what's what's your recollection of what was going through your head when kind of it became blatantly obvious what was going on?
I mean, at the time of the abduction, we were leaving a work training, and we were getting across the Green Line. We were in Galkayo, Somalia. So the city at the time was divided two clans, two opposing clans who were often in conflict. Each had their own region essentially, and we had to get across this like invisible line, this boundary that so we could work with our southern staff, and because it had to be like in that it for our organization, because there was so much conflict between these two clans, we had to like have separate offices and hire separate staff that belonged to that clan to work with these people groups,
Okay.
and so on. And so, I had had a lot of trepidation and reservations about this trip in general. I had canceled it twice before. Um, and then a few days before October 25th, 2011, I actually, while I was still in Hargeisa, called my counterpart, who is a Danish gentleman named Paul, and said, I don't feel good about this. I don't want to come down. And he basically threatened to talk to my supervisor and tell them I wasn't doing my work appropriately and I wasn't willing to do my job because this was part of my job description.
Okay.
And, I traveled all over. I went to some very remote places in East Africa. When I think back to some of the environments and some of the situations I was in that just were absolutely not safe, especially for a woman, a young woman at the time.
Yeah.
They just were very negligent in their duty of care. And so, as someone who is from the Western world, I grew up in the Midwest, very, very, just very sheltered, um, very white privilege. I think I thought, what are the chances that anything bad's going to happen? I've been living in Africa for 8 years at this point. So far, I lived there and had a great time, and my work was very important to me, and I was scared that, I was going to lose my job. So I got on that UN flight and go down to Galkayo, and the third day we're driving through town in an armed convoy. We have a driver. Paul's in the front seat, I'm in the back, and our car gets overtaken, and these very angry men with guns surround our vehicle, and someone gets in, puts a gun to my head, and starts screaming at the driver to drive. In the few minutes before all of that happened, I'm just living a normal life, right? I'm
Yeah.
ish. I'm sending text messages to my husband. I'm thinking about what I'm going to have for dinner. I'm planning my workout for when I get back to the guest house. All normal things, and then it's all just turned upside down. And I remember having two very basic fundamental thoughts when all of this was going down. As we were driving through town, driving is an understatement. We were basically up on two wheels, and the car almost flipped over as the driver was trying to, get us out of town. I remember thinking, this is so bad. This is so bad. This is so bad. I have no frame of reference for it. Like, I have never taken a course. Like, I'd done all kinds of heat trainings.
Yeah.
I'd read books. I'd heard accounts, but like nothing
No.
in practice can ever prepare you for the real thing. And then I knew in that moment that everything in my life had changed. Like, it fundamentally, I think it like changed me on a cellular level. It changed my DNA,
Yeah.
metaphorically, I guess. But trauma does that, and I've been really contemplating. I think I'm a very contemplative person, and I'm a very spiritual person. And I've been thinking about this like concept of experiencing heaven and hell while we're here on earth, as
Mm.
opposed to in the afterlife. And I think that that's really true. And this was my 93 days of hell.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah,
can understand that.
I'm sure you can.
Yeah. And it's part of the shock is how quickly your world changes,
Hmm.
isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. And it doesn't just change in the moment,
No.
like it changes fundamentally forevermore,
Yeah.
because it changes who you are as a person. It changes how you see the world. It changes how you see yourself.
Yeah.
It changes how you trust and how you don't trust. Again, the spiritual piece comes into play for me in terms of like my relationship to the universe. And I also think that like that's part of my resilience, is that I allowed it to change me, because I think that is the whole point. Like, while I can say that like it changed things, some things I was really happy with my life. I loved my work and I loved living in Africa, but I think perhaps that wasn't the plan for me and the path for me to continue to take. And so sometimes the universe just shakes you up, and it's up to you how you're going to respond to it.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's there's so little point in trying to fight the change that occurs. And
So
I know people who have,
100%.
um, but it's yeah, embrace it, roll with it, take the good from it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's the whole point. And I just don't I've been thinking a lot about this lately too. Um, because I'm working on my next book, and I'm like, when people say they don't believe that there's a purpose to our pain, I'm just like, "Oh, like, you're missing the point." Like, you just think these hard things happen and that there's no purpose, or that there's no bigger meaning in life, or there's no bigger meaning in the trauma. Then I really do believe that, um, there's a reason for all of us. And it's up to us to decipher it and to extract the meaning and do the work um, to grow from it. But I do believe that that's the whole point.
Yeah, that's a lovely way of putting it. And I agree because if we don't do the work, there's not so much meaning in it, is there?
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
It's just
And then
habits.
you're gonna repeat those patterns again. You're gonna keep
Yes.
repeating it in
Yeah, yeah,
different ways. They may not be as traumatic or dramatic, but you're gonna keep, like, playing out the same story. And
yeah,
I didn't want that. Like, this shook me awake. It shook me alive.
yeah.
Um, and I didn't wanna repeat those patterns.
Justifiably not. No,
Yeah, yeah,
madness.
yeah.
Yeah. So, what was your typical day like in those 93 days?
I mean, it was in the beginning, it was different than the latter half, because it takes a while to establish a routine.
Mhm.
Also, we moved around like 50 to 60 times. So we were outside the entire time. So it's not like they took me to a house and, locked me, like threw me in a hole, or, locked me in a room. Like, we were camping, and I use the term camping very loosely. That means for the first week, we just laid on the ground.
Mhm.
And then, well, no, that's not true. The first couple of nights we laid on the ground, and then they brought us a mat to sleep on, or to sit on, but it took weeks to get a blanket, and
Yeah,
stuff. And so, but we would sit under a tree or under a bush, and then we would sleep out in the open at night. And you never knew, like, if we were going to be forced into vehicles and they were going to drive us somewhere else and set up camp. Um, but like towards the later, I think that they were moving around. They needed to have like permission from different clans that controlled certain areas that we were in. And I think after a while, like, they lost collaboration and support. And so our movements became more limited,
yeah,
because they didn't have anywhere to take us. And so we would stay then in a camp for a week or longer. And so then that got easier to establish a routine.
yeah. Okay.
Um, and then that would look like, getting up in the morning, you're cold, you're wet, you've been sleeping out in the open. There was like tea, provided, if you will. Most of the time it was very sweet.
Hmm.
Somalis, men in particular, chew khat, which is this green plant that provides amphetamine like effects. And they just sit around all day and chew it and spit it out, and then drink really sugary tea to like counteract the bitterness of the plant. And so that's pretty much what they did all day. And, like, they're addicted to this. So if something happened to the cat run, uh, they were in bad moods. Like, that did
Yeah,
not feel fair. It's like, someone, I guess, who's addicted to cigarettes or something, and probably a little worse. But not as bad as like hard drugs. And then, I tried to move. I was really I still do yoga, but I was like really into yoga at that time in my life. And so I would try to do my yoga sequences when I had enough room to stand up under the tree that I was going to sit in all day. And then the rest of the day was just trying not to go insane.
Yeah.
trying to find ways to occupy your time, your mind, making up little games. When Paul and I were sitting together, we would talk about our lives and talk about history. I mean, he was twice my age and had lived an interesting life, so he had good stories. He was good entertainment.
Yeah.
Talk about our families. I did a lot of visualization. I did a lot of meditation. I did a lot of prayer. But I always joke and say that when I wasn't being terrorized, being a hostage is really boring. I wasn't like given books. I wasn't given notebooks to write in. If I had been able to sit there and write all day, I could have probably written 3 bestsellers. But that was not my reality. I mean, that sounds like a vacation to me.
Yes.
Um, but that was not my reality. So I was just alone with my thoughts a
Yeah.
lot of the time. And so, um, I think that is where a lot of decision making happened in terms of like how if I make it through this, which I don't think I ever really considered not surviving an option. I figured that it was going to take much longer than I had anticipated, or I was ready to like wrap my brain around, but not surviving, like dying out there didn't feel like my future.
Yeah.
And maybe that's denial, I don't know, but it's what I needed to hold on to at the time. And um and so, I think I really got to know myself out there.
Well, yeah, you certainly discover what your thresholds are, don't you?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I yes, exactly. Cause I remember having this thought like for the first several weeks, and it was it's always kind of hard to explain this, but I kept thinking like I'm not that girl. Like, I worked, in a very male dominated industry.
Mm.
And the women that I did work with were like ex-military or they were like tough, and I was not that girl. Like, I was not trained. I was not military. I was not one of these. I was this like extroverted, creative. My superpower is connecting with people. I don't know how I ended up in this job in the first place, but I loved it and I had so much fun and I had so many good ideas. And I would just like walk into the office and people like I think the Somalis loved me because I was so different from most of the expats that they worked with.
Yeah.
And I could think of so many women that I worked with that not to say that like they would have enjoyed something like this, but they could have like turned this around and used the street cred, right? Like, look how
Okay.
tough I am. And I'm like, I don't need that. I don't need that star. Like, I don't need to prove to anybody that I'm tough. Like, I don't care about all that. And I woke up one morning and I remember Paul brought me a cup of tea and I was looking around and I realized, you know what? I am that girl. I am doing this.
Yeah.
And I said to him, um, "Can we cuss on here? Can we curse?"
Absolutely. You can say anything in any way you want.
I just said, I looked at him and I said, "You know what? I'm a fucking badass." And he was like, "Hell yeah, you are." And I think in that moment, like that shifted things for me, and
Yeah.
I was just looking at this, my mouse pad for my computer. It says she remembered who she was and the game changed. And that was the moment where I remembered who I was, and it changed things for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think
Nice.
that's what makes people resilient is remembering what they've been through, and what they've survived. And you may not want to do it again. You may be really tired.
Yeah.
But you can make it through. You can do it.
Yes. Yeah. It's that dig it. It's that grit and
Yeah.
determination to see it through.
Yeah. Yeah. Because we do have what it takes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I learned that about myself.
A great thing to learn because that's
Agreed.
a keeper, isn't it? That's That's in the box for the future.
Yeah.
Anything else that happens?
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it scares me to think that way because I'm like, ooh, what else is out there? Like, what other traumas and, tragedies are waiting for me? Um, but for now, in this moment, I can say, yeah, like I've survived 100% of my bad days. So
Yep.
hopefully I'll keep doing it until I don't anymore. And, I don't know, then I can stop trying.
Yes. Yeah, but that's part of the fun of it, isn't it? We never know what's around the corner, but you know you have the capability to see it through, whatever
Mhm.
comes your way.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's just, was it so these charming gentlemen that took you for a little holiday in the desert?
Mhm.
Um, did they leave you alone most of the time, or did they do anything to try and break you down?
I think both. It just depends. It depended on where we were at. It depended on who was there too, because they worked in shifts. So there were anywhere from like I think the lowest number of guards, and I refer to them on social media as pirates because that is how they refer to themselves to me.
Okay.
People give me a lot of grief about that, as if I'm a colonizer who came in and labeled them or something, and I'm like, "No, no.
Yeah.
This is what they called themselves. This is how they referred to themselves. This is what they told me they were. So I'm
Yeah.
just using their vocabulary." Um, and sometimes there would be 6 pirates, and then sometimes there'd be more than 30. I don't know why the numbers fluctuated and changed the way they did.
That's a lot, isn't it?
Yeah, sometimes there were a lot of men milling around, heavily armed.
Yeah.
And they ranged in age. The youngest was 11. Um, so I would definitely consider him a child soldier of sorts.
Hmm.
And then probably the oldest was the colonel, is what everybody called him. And he had been a colonel in the southern Somalia. And sorry, I don't know my history very well, and it's been a long time since I've thought about him. In some sort of regime in
Yeah.
the probably the 70s, I guess. And he was actually, I think he had a soft spot for me, like almost almost fatherly in a way. But he was mean, like super mean. But also I can't go as far as saying kind. But I could tell there was like um a gentleness in the way he approached me. Um,
Okay.
and so I felt in some ways sort of protected by him, as well as another one who was a driver. We had nicknames for a lot of them so we could talk about them, like, in code kind of.
Yeah.
And so we called him Helper. I think he genuinely was a good person. He was very religious. He was devout about his praying 5 times a day. He had 8 kids. He was just born in Somalia and didn't have a lot of opportunities to provide for his family. So
Yeah.
he was kind. I can say he was kind. Um, but then there were times where yeah, we would just be terrorized. They'd wake us up in the middle of the night screaming in our faces to get in the car. I remember one time I was asking for toilet paper. Like I needed some toilet paper, just basic necessities. And the leader of the group at that time, his name was Abdi. He just freaked out on me and started screaming at me, "Do you want to die today?" And I realized, well, I'm not going to get any toilet paper. If I don't get shot, if I live through this day, I'm lucky. And so I think that that's like the most um, traumatizing part of the whole thing is you never know what to expect. And so I became I think I've always been an observant person, but I became very skilled at observing and energy and observing their actions and how they were reacting to each other and relating to each other. Because that would set the tone for the entire day and how much I could ask for, how many times I could leave my mat to go to the bathroom, whether or not I could get extra water, that kind of thing. Like my job of surviving became studying them.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I can
Mhm.
yeah, there's a lot of things spinning back in my head right now about that. Yeah.
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 Because as things go on, regardless of how resilient we are, we have those moments of hopelessness
Yeah.
where our defenses kind of they get tired and they drop and we just kind of so
Yeah.
what sort of things you had company, so Paul was there to kind of bounce off of in terms of keeping morale up, I suppose. But what sort of things do you do to keep yourself buoyant as much as you
Mm.
could?
Well, he wasn't there all of the time. They separated us a lot as punishment. Sometimes they would pull one of us away from camp and then go fire off a round of ammunition and go tell the other one that we'd been shot or we'd been sold to Al Shabaab. So, you could go days without seeing the other person. You didn't know if they were still alive or not.
Okay.
I also had the added complication of just being mad at him, because it was his fault that this happened in the first place.
Yeah.
He told me on day 27 that there was actually a direct kidnapping threat on the organization that he had not told me about when I had called a couple days prior and said, "Hey, I don't feel good about this. Remember that?" And so I felt really like angry, obviously, that information had been withheld from me, but I couldn't deal with it then because, he might have been the last person that I would see. And so I had
Yeah.
to compartmentalize that. Um, and then, um, I spent just a lot of time inside my head. I think it's like kind of textbook. I did this whole life review where
Mhm.
I would go back and like think through all of the things that had ever happened to me in my life. My mom had just passed away the year before. And so there was a lot to unpack there with her.
Yeah, yeah.
So I used that time to do some work, to do some inner work. And then when I couldn't remember anything else, then I would think about, I've always been such a daydreamer. And so I've found that I have a really good personality for a hostage because, like I'm very comfortable with silence. I'm very comfortable in solitude. I'm very comfortable by myself.
Yeah.
And so I just dreamed. I visualized. I, would walk through my apartment in my head and I dreamed about getting out of there and reuniting with my husband. I dreamed about becoming a mother and what I was going to do next for work because I sure as hell wasn't going to come back here and do this. So,
You
I
surprised me.
yeah. Um, so I think I got to the point, too, when you're in an environment like that, like, and I think it's an adaptation, your mind starts to slow down. I'm a pretty like fast mover. Like my mind moves pretty fast. Like I'm, like always on to the next thing. And I remember very vividly having this like aha, like my mental process, everything was really slow. And I think it's like some sort of coping mechanism, right? And it's an adaptation to your environment. So I got to the point where I really enjoyed that time, if you will. Like maybe they'd
Yeah.
let Paul and I have, I think there was like towards the end, like the last week, um, we could be on my mat from like, the morning until after we ate something. And I was always ready for him to go so that I could have that time back to myself. So I could just keep thinking. Um, and, in the really scary times when I was really feeling despair, prayer became my lifeline.
Okay. Well, it's there's so many stories of people being in captivity of, finding ways of coping, and some people, you know, go to religion for the first time, some people step
Mhm.
away from it, and some people reconnect with it.
Mhm.
It's horses for courses, isn't it? It's anything that can get you through it is a damn good thing.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Whatever you need.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just all sorts of what sort of did you kind of play any little games in your mind when you were
Oh,
to kind of
yeah.
occupy yourself?
Yeah, I went back to like algebra and did a bunch of like algebra problems in my head. Trivia, politics and geography and tic-tac-toe. I don't know how many times I played tic-tac-toe with little goat poops. Um, I mean, all of that. Trying spelling. I would try to spell out hard words in the sand with a stick, I mean, just
Yeah,
like you go down to like the fundamentals, because
yeah,
the only thing you're trying to do is like not get shot and also not lose your mind.
yeah,
So whatever it takes.
yeah, yeah. That's brilliant. Did you ever get stopped from engaging in those things? Did they ever interrupt you and say no, you can't? Or
Yeah, there was a point, again, because I'm a teacher, like I'm always looking for an opportunity to like, connect. And somehow we got our hands on a piece of cardboard and a pen. Don't remember how. But I made a vocabulary game with English words, and then I drew the pictures, and it was like a memory game, right? So you flip everything over and then you have to play memory. So chair, and then try to find the picture of the chair, the word and match the word in the picture. And I had so much fun like with some of the younger pirates who were trying to learn English. And, they were just there for their cigarettes and their cat. And probably, I think they were getting 20 bucks a day. They weren't mean. Um, and we had so much fun. We would play for like hours.
yes,
And then the leader of the group, Bashir, came out, and boy, that pissed him off. He took everything, he like ripped it up in front of us. And, I'm sure they got in trouble too, but that was sad. Um, Yeah, I mean, it was always like punishing us for negotiations not going well, as if we had anything to do with it, or as if we could like affect the progress in any way,
well, yeah,
So,
yes,
they'd come out and take a blanket. All you've got is a blanket. That's all you've got to your name is a blanket. And they would take that because negotiations weren't moving in the right direction. So
yeah,
it's like, always take the toilet paper or tissues, or no water for you today because they only offered another 20,000, or, because they wanted $45 million. That's where the ransom started.
yeah.
Um, so I think our people countered 20,000. So once I heard that, I was like, oh, okay, this is going to take a while. Like this is going to
Yeah,
take a
that's quite
really
a
long
drop.
time to meet in the middle.
Yes. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I think, I don't, and I can't substantiate this really, but my understanding was that they were around the $4 million mark when the rescue happened.
yeah. Is there anything in particular that stands out for you, um, in terms of kind of managing your mind and to maintain that kind of mental resilience and emotional resilience as well,
Mhm.
in particular to keep you on an even keel that you think people can apply in everyday life?
I think people need to understand how incredibly powerful their minds are.
Yeah,
It is our most powerful tool. Um, I go back to that all the time. Like, of all the things that I've learned through this experience, is that I have the power,
yeah,
and so the direction that your thoughts take and the that you allow them to take or that you drive them in the direction, the things that you spend your time thinking about are going to become your reality.
Yeah.
They just will. All I spent my time thinking about was freedom and having a baby. I wanted to become a mom, and that I would just visualize that over and over again. And guess what? I ended up getting pregnant 3 days after the rescue, and my son was in my arms, um, a year to the date of the kidnapping.
Really?
Yeah. Like, how crazy is that? And I just, I'm here because of the US Special Forces. I'm here because of miracles. But I think I'm also here because I chose to focus forward on life instead of backwards on despair and death.
Yeah.
And that has been one of my greatest lessons. And I know that, you know, I know that this gets a little like woo woo and whatnot, but I think people need to understand how incredibly powerful their minds really are. And you can create resilience.
Yeah.
You can develop it, you can practice it, you can focus on it, you can manifest it. Um, if that's what you want to create in your life, you can absolutely do that.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. It's not something we're born with. We learn how to do it.
Yeah. And you can't learn resilience unless you go through hard stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Again, it's the whole point.
Yeah. It sucks, but it's worth it.
It totally sucks. But this is the human experience. No one said it wasn't going to suck.
No, no. There's a to coin an old expression from my father and my grandfather said we're always in the shit. It's just the depth that varies.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah,
I get it. I get it.
yes. Haven't yet come up smelling of roses, but there we go.
Someday.
Yeah, well, yeah, constant work in progress.
Hmm.
So, was there any indication for you? Did you have kind of your spidey senses of any impending rescue?
No, not at all. Like I don't know why. I've never really thought about that. Other than I didn't know that that was a possibility. You know what I mean? I
Yeah,
had no idea that rescues happened. I don't think it's something that they talk about a lot because
yeah,
of many reasons. Um, but when on January 25th, that night, um, when somebody, they overtook the camp and shot everybody, essentially, I thought we were being kidnapped by another group. I hadn't,
yeah,
it still, even then, didn't enter my mind that this could be help. And I thought, at that point, I really was a goner. I just was like, there was kind of this feeling of like, man, I've worked so hard to survive, and now
yeah,
this is really how it's going to end.
yeah,
Like that part didn't feel resonant and okay. It felt like such a disappointment. So, when I'm thinking either A, I'm going to die, or B, I'm going to be kidnapped by another group and then move to that next level, like that lower level of shit, um, imagine my surprise when they identify themselves as help.
yep,
It was the shock of my life. And I'm infinitely grateful. Infinitely.
yeah, yeah. No kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a
And
good.
I would imagine Paul is too, because I don't think the Danish government was going to come and rescue us.
Probably would have taken longer. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
It's yeah, it's I mean, you to get to be rescued. I'm just I'm just playing that scenario through in my head of being in that position, 93 days, and no indication of any sign of release,
Mm-mm.
and then it all kicks. I take it was at night.
It was in
Yeah,
the middle of the night. I don't know what time, but yeah,
but
it
yeah,
was dark, very dark.
darkness is their friend. They have all the kit,
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
the kit and the capability.
Clearly.
Yes, yeah, they're bloody good at their job.
Hmm.
Um, so trying to make sense of that when you hear all that gunfire going off in the middle of the night and not having any expectation of being rescued would, yeah, that would put the wind up you a little bit.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was really scary.
yeah. Um, so when they identified themselves and called you by name,
Hmm.
what was your what did you believe them to start with?
Well, I just kept saying over and over again, like, you're American? Wait a second, you're American?
Are you
Like, I
lost?
just, yeah, yeah, like, I just couldn't, I think I just couldn't wrap my brain around like how they could have found us. Like, I didn't, again, I don't come from a military background or a military family or anything. So
Yeah,
I didn't know, I've learned so much in the aftermath, but I didn't know that this was a possibility. I didn't know that we had even this functionality. I thought that, special forces just came to get rid of the bad guys and then to rescue military folks. Like the only story I'd heard really was like Jessica Lynch. And so me, like, I'm sorry, but the president of the United States knows me, who I am. Like what? And then imagine like, so yeah, I believe them, but I remember thinking like, being like, we got to get out of here. Like, you don't know who these guys are. You don't know like what they're capable of. And I think I felt like I was really worried that something was going to happen to them. And now in retrospect, it's like so funny to think that the like US, like most elite soldiers, that I was like worried for their safety, that these pirates who were, like ill-equipped in so many ways were gonna come and, still get us, and they were after us and stuff. So
yeah,
they just kept saying, it's fine. Like, we're good. Like,
yeah,
the helicopters are coming in. It's okay.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, I mean, it's I always kind of chuckle when you hear people say like, no one is going to come in and save you. You have to, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, actually, that's
sometimes
not entirely true. Sometimes they do.
yeah,
Sometimes you really need some help, and help always comes in to save the day. And it really is just the fact that I survived the rescue too. Like, I think a lot of times hostages don't survive that portion, which is why a military intervention is like the last resort. There are way too many risks
yeah,
of,
it's a complex, difficult
yes,
task to
yeah,
to be completely successful.
yeah. And this one was, in terms of, I don't think there were any other options in terms of saving life on the other side.
No,
Um,
that's not an option because they're not going to give that option.
no. And I've heard, I think I struggled with that for a long time, actually. Um, but I've, like the FBI, like the director of the FBI is like, well, they raise their guns first, and if you fire at us, we're going to fire back. And that kind of put things in perspective for me.
Yeah, because that could have, any day within those 93 or on the 94th day, they could have just gone, oh,
Yeah.
screw this, we're done with
Yeah.
it, and that's
Yeah.
you gone.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, trust me, they threatened that many times.
I'm sure they did. Yeah, yeah. It's because life is extraordinarily cheap, isn't it, over there?
Yeah. And I think it's becoming cheaper in other places too, you
Hmm.
know. But yeah, it isn't valuable. And that's a really interesting conundrum.
Well, they had a high value on it, 45 million.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and then you can like sit there and think about like, well, whose life is worth more? And, like it gets very complicated and it makes my head hurt. But,
Yes.
these
Yes.
are big picture questions like of morality and values. And I think another thing that I learned out there too is that things are not black and white.
No.
Things get gray very, very fast. Um,
Yes.
and again, I get so much backlash, especially on social media, for being there in the first place. And um, I always, say I was doing my job. Governments are funding these programs and requiring people like me to go out and do our jobs. This is what they
Yeah.
want. This is what the taxpayers are paying for. Um, and they've elected officials to make those decisions. And so I just got caught in a really bad situation.
Yes. Nobody. You were there with a good purpose and good intentions.
Yeah, and I mean, I understand that conversation around intention and impact. I think, like you can have the best of intentions, but perhaps the impact is problematic or harmful.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that that's a bigger picture, like question around like, does humanitarian aid or development, does it help or harm?
Hmm.
Um, I still believe it helps, and I believe in it as a fundamental right for people to uh, have things like education and infrastructure and governance and basic human things like water and food.
Yeah.
And in parts of the world where corruption reigns supreme, it does require humanitarian intervention. And yeah, I got caught in the crosshairs of that.
Yeah. It's a difficult situation to manage, really, isn't it?
I
Because it is
think
about
so.
trying to manage and mitigate rather than control, because there's no control over it.
No, no, and I don't think that that's the point either. Like it is about building capacity and basically working yourself out of a job.
Yeah.
Um, and in parts of the world, I do think that that's happening. But there are still people suffering, and I think it's hard to stand by as a human being and watch that happen.
Yeah. It's everyone deserves to have the ability to live comfortably, not necessarily, not everyone being millionaires, but
Right.
just to be able to live rather than just exist.
Yeah. Water, food,
Yeah.
education, healthcare,
Yep.
basic human rights.
Yep.
So.
Some people aren't up for that game, though, are they? Fortunately.
No, I guess not. And that's not my problem. At the end of the day, I'm just responsible for me and my impact in the world.
Yes. Well, I think you have a really positive impact on the world with what you do.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I'm trying.
Yeah. Well, that's all we can ever do, isn't it? Do our
Yeah.
little bit.
And likewise, likewise, how you've turned your traumas and your tragedies into something really helpful for people to understand themselves and how to move forward. I mean, that's a really generous contribution.
Thank you. It's nice to be able to help some people with, bring
Mhm.
some good from the, to coin another expression, they say you can't polish a turd, but you can roll it in glitter.
I haven't heard that one, but it's pretty good. I feel like that must be very English.
Yes, I think so. But yeah, it does kind of sum things up quite
It
nicely
sure
in
does.
some ways.
And I like glitter a lot. So
Well, who doesn't? Exactly. Yeah. It's the season for it. We're just in
yeah.
the this weekend, this coming weekend is the final of Strictly Come Dancing with our version of Dancing with the Stars.
Hmm.
So it's the final this coming weekend. So it's been glitter and sequins for the last 3 months.
I love it.
Yeah,
I'm here for
it's a favorite in this house. We love it.
it. I'm
Absolutely love it.
sure.
The light entertainment.
Well, we like to watch Survivor, oddly enough. So I'm always like, nope, not gonna do that again. Mm-mm.
No, no, just
Nope. I already survived. I already won. So
yes.
I don't need that one.
Yeah, yeah,
Yep, check.
yeah. On that one. Yeah, now reap the rewards of it. That's the and share the love. That's what it's about.
100%.
Oh dear. So how so now with the rescue, what's what was the timescale like for you, and what was the experience like of processing that whole thing?
I mean, still, it's never ending.
Yeah,
So I had a really interesting like realization probably a month or so ago actually, and it's been 12 years
yeah,
since everything happened. I was writing an email, somebody had, I can't remember what it was about, but they had said that they'd read my book, and I think something like they were sorry that had to go through something like that. And I wrote back, thanks so much for taking the time to read my book. I wouldn't want to go through it again, but I'm at peace with it now.
yeah,
And I think for me, that feels like some sort of mountaintop of healing and recovery, is to have made peace with the fact that it happened and that it changed things. And the emotion, it's not so charged
yeah,
anymore in terms of reflection or recounting the details of what happened. And I can say with like 100% sincerity, I am really, really happy. And I have a really good life, and I'm very, very grateful for that. And, you know, again, I wouldn't want to go through it again. And somebody asked me not too long ago, was it worth it? Like now that have the kind of life that you have now and everything. And I'm like, no, it wasn't worth it. Like it was really, really hard, and hard for my whole family. It was hard for the SEALs that jumped out of a helicopter. It was hard for the American government who had to pay and put all these resources together. It was hard for my husband. No, but it's not about whether or not it was worth it. It's about how you're going to choose to move forward and carry it.
yeah.
Nothing's ever going to feel worth it.
Not like that. Not from stuff, things like that. No.
So, but I thought that was interesting. So yeah, I mean, I think my biggest takeaway and my number one recommendation, and it's not sexy and it's not exciting, there's no hack, there's no like
Mhm.
fast forward. It doesn't matter how much therapy you do, it doesn't matter how much, plant medicine you do, or uh, how much running you do. It's just going to take time, and it takes the time it needs to take. Like there's no prescription for recovery. But you do have to, it's the surviving survival uh that's really hard and that gets people. Because I think we don't talk about it enough, and I don't think we give people enough um grace and compassion for that space in the aftermath of trauma, and we expect them just to bounce back. And maybe I'm speaking very much from an American perspective too, because we're a society of just grinning and bearing it and getting through. But I've really taken the time, and there's still lots more to process and heal from. So I'm committed to that journey, because
Yeah.
this is the work that I'm supposed to do in this life.
Yes. I can't find an argument with any of that. It's this is where I think that healthcare systems need to change
Yeah.
and not force people to get better
Yeah.
quicker than
Yeah.
they're capable of doing.
Yeah.
limiting
Yeah, like
limiting access to treatment because they've had their run of sessions.
I was just gonna say that. Like, what is 6 therapy sessions? Like, that barely scratches the surface, you
It's
know? Like,
horrible,
yeah,
really.
all of it, all of it.
Yeah,
We're just focused on the wrong things. And I, again, am very fortunate that I came back and I had a great support system and I was able to take that time, that I wasn't financially destitute when I came home, as many hostages are,
yeah,
that my family hadn't had to sell their homes and mortgage or, second mortgage them, or, I didn't have to pay back a ransom. Um, like probably the luckiest former hostage out there alive, but uh, I'm also doing my best to pay it forward and to give back because of that. So, yeah, at the end of the day, I'm just a human being and I'm just trying to do my best. But I do really feel like I'm trying.
yeah, yeah. How how it's going to be probably sound like a silly question. There's two parts to it, but how important for you was your family in the recovery piece from that and letting the worst of the dust settle? And how did they cope with things when you came back?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think the person that was most affected was my husband.
Hmm.
And he's just been an enormous gift. He is so patient, and just so loving. And I think he was just so happy to have me home. We've
Yeah,
certainly had our ups and downs, as every couple does. And it's been hard. We left Africa. He didn't have a job for a long time. It was the first time he lived in the States. We had a baby to take care of that never slept. I was constantly melting down because I had PTSD and postpartum depression. I mean, it was hard for a long time, but he was as committed to the process and the journey as I was. And I wanted to leave, constantly. I wanted to leave like the US. I wanted to go back to Africa. I wanted to try to like jump back into my life there, and just kind of ignore all of this. And
yeah,
he just wouldn't let me. He just kept saying, "You're not ready, and it's not the best thing for you, and it's not the best thing for our family." Um, I think for my extended family, like my dad and my siblings, it was very disruptive to their lives. They traveled to Africa, and they were in DC a lot, meeting with the FBI and other government officials, the State Department. So I think it brought like coming home brought a sense of like normalcy back for them, and
yeah.
they could resume their lives. And the fact that we had such a great outcome, there was, I think, on their part, I think they were worried about me for sure, but there was this sense of celebration. But they've been there for me. They have supported me and my journey. I'm very close to my dad, and he's said some hard truths that were hard to hear that I needed to hear. And he's just been an extraordinary listener. And yeah, I'm just really grateful.
Nice. And they're all good as well now.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. My brother served for 10 years in the military after. He was
Okay.
also Special Forces, a Green Beret. And he's moved on now. He's studying, he's getting his MBA at Harvard, so he's doing really good.
Fantastic.
And yeah, my sister's got a family and she works as a social worker, and yeah, I think life is good.
I think, yes, it's a bumpy road, but you've bounced back remarkably well and definitely made the best of it,
Thank you.
which
I
is
appreciate
I mean, writing your book,
it.
all the things you put out on social media. I love what you put out on Instagram.
Thanks.
Love your videos. I think they're brilliant.
Thanks. Well, people have questions. Like, what's
Yes,
it like? Like and I don't know. I think it demystifies and it also makes me more approachable because I think it's important to talk about these things. And, uh, not everybody can identify with being held hostage for 93 days, but I think a lot of us can identify with feeling contained or detained in different ways. And it's a
absolutely.
universal feeling in some regards. So
Yeah.
I really looked hard to find that common thread with my audience, and it's been a great community. I've made a lot of friends and a lot of great connections like this one because of it.
Yeah, there's some real pluses to social media.
I think so. Yeah.
It's how you use, like everything, it's how you use it, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Always.
And ignoring the assholes.
Yeah. They don't know me.
No. And there's a thin veil everywhere.
Yeah. And I just think people are really unhealed and they're not doing their own work. So,
Yeah. Now, I wanted to ask you about your TED talk.
hmm
And changes your proof of life.
hmm
How did that come about? How did that
I had
title?
a great speech coach.
Okay.
Yeah, I did. And we were talking about the proof of life video and really like diving into this change, this concept of change and how it's a real gift. It's an invitation. And we landed on this idea that when things aren't changing, and evolving in your life or in
Hmm.
the world or in nature, like then there's something wrong, right? Like we're supposed to change. Life is
Yes.
supposed to change. It's good and bad, and it's hard whether it's good or bad. But my thesis, I guess, if you will, for the TED Talk was that change is our proof that we're living.
Yeah.
And if things aren't changing, then we're not really living. So, and I still believe that.
Yeah. I think it's kind of it's that just existing rather than living.
Mhm. Exactly. And I am not into the whole existence thing. I want to really live.
Oh God, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's way too short to waste it.
Hmm I had a teacher once say life's too long to waste it. And I thought, what an interesting reframe, because we always hear how short it is, but sometimes I do think sometimes, for those of us who are lucky, it's really long. It's like a lot of time to waste.
Some people, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I don't know. I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah. Maybe I had the the pleasure and privilege of attending the funeral of a 102-year-old former Royal Marine.
Mm,
I'm the chairman of the branch of this area of the Royal Marines Association, and we got a call and we managed to get a bugler and
hmm
Royal Marines band and stuff, and it was just and hearing about his life because none of us had ever met him before, and we're just listening to his life story. Oh my God, he was in World War II as a Royal Marine
Yeah. Yeah.
and died a month ago, and it
Mm,
was just extraordinary.
yeah. It's a long time.
That is a long time to have your feet on the planet.
Yeah. Wow. What a gift.
Yeah, so I've never thought about it that way either. Actually, it's interesting.
Hmm
Yeah, yeah. So what was it that has how has all this kind of shaped the way that you approach telling and sharing your story?
Well, I think just like all of it, it's evolved.
Hmm.
Um, I was really uncomfortable in the spotlight for a very long time. I was afraid of so many things, but mainly that people would think that I was like capitalizing on this experience.
Why shouldn't you?
That in and of itself is a good question. I think um I've always tried to be very respectful of the risks in terms of this, the Navy SEALs and that
Hmm.
community. I've worked really hard to give back to that community, and they've been very welcoming to me. But I think let's see, it was probably like 2018, and I had an opportunity to meet some of them again. It was
Okay,
very
nice.
private, and I
Yeah.
didn't share about it openly or publicly. Because I am so open and public about so many things that sometimes I just want to keep some things for me. And I kept that for myself. And
Yeah.
but it was a game changer for me in my healing evolution. And I think also I had been telling the story with them as the hero, as the focal point, which they very well should be. But after I spent a day with them back in 2018, I realized that there can be two heroes in a story.
Hmm.
We're I think taught that there can only be one, but maybe if you're writing a fairy tale, but like it's not just Prince Charming who's the hero, it's also the damsel in distress who survived
Yes.
those 93 days so that they could rescue me. And I think the narrative really shifted in my head, and that helped me root myself in the story and how I felt I could honor all of us um, in the retelling, and that was very empowering for me.
Yeah.
Um, and I've had people who've like been in my life for a long time from on the speaking side, and I that has been some of the feedback I've gotten is like, wow, like you've I don't know what happened or what's changed, but the way you tell the story has changed so much. It's so much more um there's so much more power coming from you. And I'm like, oh, well, that's because I know who I am in the story now. But again, that took time to identify.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah. And so I'm lucky to get to do that like a lot, and it does, I do make money doing it because it's really hard. And it's been a great way to connect with people. I really do try my hardest to make people think and inspire them. And it's been a really interesting way to work and to make a living, and I feel infinitely grateful for that.
Nice. Well, it's enormously cathartic, isn't it, to
I think so,
write
yeah.
about it and to speak about it.
Mm. Yeah,
It
and to
helps.
connect with other people who have their stories.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
brings everything into perspective.
Yes. Yeah. It helps to and things get filed away,
Mhm.
which is why,
Absolutely.
getting to the point of being able to talk to it as you
Yeah.
have done without the overwhelm.
Yeah, it comes with practice.
Yeah. Just
Yeah.
fold away I just kind of describe it like an old black and white photo album. You just flick through and you go, "Oh, I remember that. That was really shit. Oh, that was
Mhm.
good."
Yeah, 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 and I couldn't have done that 6 or 7 years ago.
Yeah. 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 So what are you what are your plans for the future for yourself?
Oh, I love that question. Um, well, I'm growing my business now. I have a publishing company for women.
Hmm.
And I feel very called to like support women in telling their stories. And we deal with a lot of really hard stories here. The company is called Soul Speak Press, and uh, we're growing exponentially, and which is really cool. And I think for the foreseeable, like this feels like my purpose
Yeah.
and my mission. And um, I always kind of joke that I didn't have a third kid because this is my baby. And probably spend more nights awake thinking about my authors and the work that we're doing than I ever did with my kids. But it's cool to have connected with a passion that was birthed out of so much pain. Um,
Yes.
and it feels meaningful, and I'm like probably got another 25 years of work ahead of me, if not more, and it's really exciting to think about where we're going to go from here, and how many women's stories we're putting out into the world that not only heal them through telling and writing but also the readers. So
Yeah.
yeah, so I'm just going to keep going until I can't, and
Good.
we'll see.
Good. It's a fantastic thing that you do.
Thank you.
Love
Likewise.
it. Love it. There's got there's two things I wanted to ask before we wrap up. And
Uh-huh.
it's so if you could speak to yourself before you were kidnapped,
Mm.
what would you say to yourself?
You can trust what you know to be true. I know you were raised to not believe in yourself and to believe yourself. Um, but that's not true. And you know the way, you know the truth, and you can trust it and you can follow it. It's your guiding, it's your North Star.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Nice. Very nice. And last question for you. What's the legacy that you want to leave through everything that you do now and that what you're planning for the future?
Mm. I hope that my legacy is that I will be remembered as a champion for women. And that I was not afraid of people's pain.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that I didn't look away. But instead, I built a space where women can safely come and heal through writing and speaking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hope that's what can be said of me at the end of my days.
Got a funny feeling it will be.
Well, I'm sure there'll be lots of things said, but at the end of the day, I won't be here to hear them, so that's
No,
okay.
exactly. Well, if you've got friends like some of the ones I've got, yeah, there'll be some very colourful things said.
For sure. Well, I really do appreciate this opportunity to share. Thank you so much.
Loved speaking with you today. Thank you, Jessica, very much. It's
Really
been
appreciate it.
an absolute joy.
Thank you.